Hi, love leaders. It's Dr. Shannon Roberts, your host for the Love Leading Podcast, where we discuss how to create connection in your most important relationship that God designed, bringing health and sometimes healing while deepening intimacy. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Love Leading Podcast with your host, Dr. Shannon Roberts. It's good to be back with you today. We are in our Naked and Exposed series. We're on episode 6. So if you've missed the previous 5, you're going to want to make sure you go back and listen, because every one of these episodes are building on the last, and I am walking you through my most recently released book, Naked Exposed, Learning to Love Well in Your Most Important Relationship, Your Marriage, by using the Intimacy for Life method. And so I'm walking you through chapter by chapter, and it is such good, rich information to have, because this is what I experientially take every single one of my couples through my program, the Marriage Made Whole 2-day intensive, and the Marriage Momentum follow-up program. And so this information is vital for you to understand and get. I'm so thrilled that I have the opportunity and the platform to be able to get it into your hands and ears and sight, to be able to explain all of my life experience and research and my dissertation works for you to get it. So don't miss out on those first 5 episodes. But today, oh my goodness, today's rich information is taking you through understanding proper protest systems in marriage, the way that couples manage conflict. And so I am just going to dive in, because there's a lot of rich information that we're going to be building on from having gone through that thick neuroscience information on romantic love and how our brain chemistry, our neurobiological wiring system that we're born with, operates in those connection points, and the attachment science, and how that transfers from, when we were children, working in attachment relationships with our primary caregivers, to romantic love attachment in our romantic attachment partnerships. And so today we're building on that information to understand why we do what we do in the way that we handle conflict. And that I've always said, it's not that couples fight. In fact, proper protest systems, the way that we protest what we don't like in our relationship, the way we exert the expression of those things, is actually a really healthy system. And it's not that we protest, it's problematic sometimes in how we protest, or how our fight cycle rolls out in the dance that we do with our partner. And so most of the time when my couples come in to my office, they say things like, we just don't communicate well. We can't seem to stay on the same page. We need help in the way that we manage conflict. This is the number one complaint that most couples come in with. Yes, there are certain attributes of the things they fight about most, but they are already trying to understand that we can't get to the other side of those topics. They keep coming back up and up and up and up. Or we can't seem to find a way or approach that when we enter into those bumps or rough spots, that we can end up on the other side of those conversations feeling good about resolve, or feeling good about feeling heard or understood, or feeling reconnected once we weren't sure of the other person in the moment of the disconnect. And what they describe when I go into their relationship history, that this kind of rigid, unyielding cycle of communication has left years sometimes, but definitely themes unresolved for a long period of time. And what I shared with you is actually that dance cycle actually is the number one qualifier or identifier of how couples over time slowly erode away from each other. They slowly erode from feeling connected or satisfied in the relationship. It diminishes that emotional safety and security of feeling closely connected, or in their words, in love. And it is the intimacy eroder, where slowly that want to disappears, to want to reach for or be vulnerable or feel warm or to engage in lighthearted fun or to even demonstrate in physically affectionate or sexually intimate connection points. So this is the reason why today is so rich in understanding. It's not that you fight, it's how you fight that becomes the biggest indicator of maybe the temperature of your marital relationship. So let's dive in. Proper protest systems. So when I say, what do you mean, Dr. Shannon, by protest systems? Well, it's those moments where you are communicating a dissatisfaction or a not sure of you, or an emotional need, right? So it's easy to share, especially in the beginning of our relationship, our favorable things that we're feeling and experiencing. It's easy to share, oh my goodness, I like that. Thank you for doing that. I like how you're showing up for me, right? And then equally as important is the ability to share when maybe you don't feel as if their partner is showing up for you, or when we have reached for a need or a longing or a want, and they haven't necessarily caught that in a way that feels caught, right? That we don't feel heard or understood. So we protest when we're not feeling that connection, when we feel as if maybe the partner isn't loving or accepting or available or responsive to what we are reaching about. And so then we go into what's called a protest. I don't like this. But if we're looking at intimacy, remember, intimacy is being known and knowing, right? So if I am sharing some things about you in these moments of protest that I don't like, then I am revealing a part of who I am. Here are my likes. Here are my not likes. It's still, if we can transfer the way we see those protest systems, it is a form of opportunity to know and understand our partner better. So transferring it from they're sharing disfavor, they're sharing what they don't like about me, to, oh, they're sharing a part of who they are that I get to know and understand at a deeper level, which equips me to learn how to love well if I can hear it from that perspective and see it from that lens, which is easy to do if the way that we're protesting is promoting safety and security, if it's promoting opportunities of reconnection and problem solving, if it's promoting ways of our partner moving towards us in those moments. Where it becomes problematic is when our mechanism to protest is not doing all of those attributes. It's not promoting safety and security. It's not promoting opportunities of our partner moving towards us. It's not promoting opportunities of reconnection, problem solving, and repair and healing. And so that's the reason why I had to talk about the brain first before we got into understanding how that presentation looks in fight cycles of couples. Because when our protest or our response to our partner in protest is in that reactionary back brain moment of self-protection, when we move into that emotional sucker punch of, I'm not sure of you, and we move into a more reactionary protest of fight, flight, or freeze, over time, it promotes insecure attachment patterns in the relationship. And so those protest systems become ineffective in the way that it's supposed to bring you back to a connected union of team. It becomes actually the source of what starts now an insecure attachment. And then it compounds in each other. It shifts the conversations that we tell ourselves about our partner. It shifts our want to and how we show up. It continues to expound a more insecure attachment, protest, and response mechanism in the fight cycle. And then we anticipate a negative approach that we're going to get from our partner before it even begins. If you think about it, it's not what we fight about. In fact, couples say, my goodness, we fight about the silliest things. Or a minor thing can trigger a larger thing because it's this amygdala storage, this negative emotional memory center that ignites a reactionary response. It fuels this negative story we tell ourselves about our partner, about how they are or how they're going to respond even before they respond, based on how that dance has played out over and over and over again. So it's really not about the trigger moment or the situation. It becomes about the same dance that occurs regardless of what the conflict is about. Because it's the same story, it's the same dance moves, and it leaves us in the same disconnected place every time. So what I do is I help my partners really kind of understand this. We go back and we understand family of origin influence and how that influences our attachment patterns coming into the relationship. We go and we understand this brain chemistry, so we understand that in those emotional flooding or emotional reactionary moments, that each one of us are in a emotionally flooded place. It just has a different presentation a lot of times in the way that we self-protect. We talk through what that external presentation of a protest system is. For some, it shows in that moment of reactionary protest to be a ramped up presentation or a fight. For some, in that dance move, it is a move away presentation or a flight. And for some, it is a shutdown or a freeze presentation. And then we understand how those reactions further ingrain and compound negatively on itself. So for example, if you are a ramper upper in the way that you protest, you get critical or angry or accusatory or blaming, or, all of those really more emotionally outburstic kind of presentation when you're protesting, I'm not sure of you. That in turn has a negative reactionary response to a freezer. When they sense that that doesn't seem safe, they in opposite, instead of moving towards, either shut down or move away. And that looks like physically exiting, or refusal to have conversations, or preoccupation with external tasks or events or circumstances outside of the home, or rejection, or stonewalling, which is a refusal to talk, right? And so then, of course, that's problematic for the ramper upper. They continue to ramp up because they can't get their needs heard and met and understood. And so their presentation becomes much more escalated, which only further fuels the flighter or freezer in their presentation. And so this dance goes on and on and on. And so they don't feel either one safe in that emotional connection point. Difficult situations go unresolved. Necessary problem solvings become more heightened in their stress. We move from needing to resolve to problem solving, putting out fires, living in urgency. And you can tell how this can be continually problematic and leaving couples feeling helpless, hopeless, powerless in their relationship by the time they feel as if they're crazy. And they'll say things to me like, I act so different in the way that I communicate with my partner than I do with anybody else on the planet. It makes me crazy. It makes me want to pull my hair out. I say and do the most irrational things. They say and do the most irrational things. They act like not the best version of themselves. We can't find compassion and empathy for one another in the moment. And sometimes it's really not even about that here and now thing that caused it and spurred it. We throw in the whole kitchen sink. History comes back in. And then we hear about that same offense over and over again. And we always think we've actually gotten to a level of forgiveness. And then all of a sudden it's back unearthed again. So you're getting it, right? And so it's this broken fight cycle that doesn't promote what it was supposed to be intended for. I don't know about you, but is a baby's crying unpleasant? Absolutely. Do we move towards it anyway? Yes. So the one subtle difference between the attachment co-regulation interaction between primary caregiver and child versus our romantic attachment system with our partners is that it's easier in our minds to justify the one-sidedness that we move towards, we provide for, we give unconditional regard and response to these dependent children that sometimes we don't get a whole lot back from. But that power is not the same in our romantic attachment partnerships. When we're equally wanting and needing our partner to respond to our protesting or our crying, when we have wants and needs, even though we might not necessarily be crying, or maybe we are, we still want our partner to move towards, even in a time when we're not presenting in our most loveliest fashion, right? And when we don't, that's not that natural tendency to move towards an unlovely, or I call a prickly protest system. It's hard to move towards a partner who's not speaking to us. It's hard to move towards a partner who seems as if they're consistently rejecting us. It's hard to move to a partner who is yelling or condemning us. Those aren't seen in the most loveliest, endearing fashion, as if we need to move towards a crying baby and provide consolation, provision, and soothing. So I'm hoping that you guys get this. So in my book, I actually have a map that couples will go through, and they will map out a fight cycle on what happens from the moment of that trigger, when we feel that dashboard, visceral kind of sensation of warning, the story we begin telling ourselves to explain what that trigger was about our partner, how it hits on our area of vulnerability or sensitivity, that amygdala storage system, what are a very vulnerable and soft and tender emotion that it hit, and then what we move into a self-protective emotion. So we move from primary, vulnerable, soft emotion to self-protective, prickly emotion. And then what our protest action tendency is in the moment, which then activates our partner, and they begin their process of trying to make sense of that secondary emotion and that action tendency. And then they land on their own cognitive appraisal and the story they tell themselves. And sometimes that activates their area of sensitivity and vulnerabilities as well. And they move from their soft primary emotion to their secondary emotion presentation. And then they have their own action tendency and protest system too in the dance. And what they come to realize is that the trigger shifts and changes, but the dance moves rarely do. They very much look similar every single time. And we make this really big in the room so that they see it when it shows up. It's like that unwanted guest in your home, that thing they do in those hard moments. And it becomes the enemy. And we help them map it and see it over and over again, because we only have nanoseconds to respond to it in the real life, right? And we get them to understand what their areas of vulnerabilities are, what the stories they tell themselves in the moment, and how their protesting actually leaves them with their unmet longings, unmet needs, and lack of reconnection in those moments. So this mapping system really becomes very effective because then they begin working together as a team against what they do in those moments rather than working against each other in those moments. I'm hoping this makes sense. So let me give you an example of a disconnect cycle that I give in my book. So let's say this couple comes into a protest system because one of the partners always comes home late from work. Despite previous protests, despite conversations about how this is impactful to the other partner or the family, or, you know, the safety and security of being able to plan for, you know, meals together or extracurricular activities and coordinating, you know, mapping of carpooling and, you know, all these other things, right? They've had conversations, but it consistently happens. And so now the protests has continued to get escalated. So when it happens, the story the first partner tells themselves is they're never home when they say they'll be. They don't appreciate my contribution to the family of having a proper meal planned. And it seems as if all their things become more important than our family, than my wants and desires, on how it makes me feel. And it leaves this lingering amygdala hijack of, I am not a priority, I am unimportant. They're going to just do what's more important to them, no matter how much I try to make them understand it. And so that leaves their primary emotion, the feelings of lonely, sad, or hurt. But over time, this protest goes unresolved. And so now they quickly move into a more prickly version of the protest, and they get angry when they walk through the door. And their protest system moves into complaints, accusations, attack, and passive-aggressive actions. And it leaves in that angry and prickly protest of fight, it leaves the lacking of really needing to be heard, understood, and valued off the table. And so the counterpart of that is then the partner experiences the anger and the escalated protest of attack. And then they start trying to understand that presentation because it is an emotional reactive moment. Their dashboard goes off. They feel the sucker punch too. And the story they begin telling themselves is, my partner just doesn't understand the pressures that I carry at work, that things don't get wrapped up very easily on their own. I wish they understood the pressures of being the only breadwinner and the need to perform well to sustain the income to provide and keep my job performance. And it's hard to balance this work life that I want to be recognized for and understood. And then that really triggers that, Amy, I am just not appreciated for what I sacrifice in this relationship and in this family. My work and my value is taken for granted, right? And they move from feeling hurt and disrespected, unappreciated, to a cool indifference. The external presentation of that internal dysregulation comes across as cold and uncaring, because then they protest with a massive shutdown, a withdrawal, a withholding of communication, and very cold and distant body language. And that leaves the inability for that his or her longing to have a soft place to fall and a home to be a warm respite from the hard world of work. Do we get this? And so when we know and understand it, when we're able to realize that the secondary emotion and the escalated protest system and the fight cycle leaves the inability to come back together on the same lily pad, the inability to feel heard, understood, because we're not sharing the more vulnerable parts of the stories and why it's so impactful, and our primary emotion of vulnerability, because we get hardened with wanting to take those risks and to make ourselves vulnerable, feeling as if the story we tell ourselves is it's not going to matter anyway. I know this is a hard chapter for us to talk about, but necessary, because this is the problem. But tune in next week so that you can start hearing the solutions and how we help couples get out of this rigid fight cycle, how we over time shift the stories that they have of one another in that negative storyline, how we can move the I don't want to show up back into a want to again, because it is capable. We have the ability to rewire these brain mechanisms in the way that we show up more safe in these really hard moments. So don't forget to tune back in, because the solution is coming and the hope steps are here. All right. Thank you for being with me in this episode of the Love Leading Podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a beat, and share this with whoever you think might benefit from it. It's been my honor and my joy. Go love well.